start with why do we drink and your insights, and then I'll jump in a couple minutes.
I don't know if there's a big misconception on why we drink or use drugs. I mean, I know the big book says that we drink because we like the effect produced by alcohol.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I guess is pretty obvious. But, I mean, I think for most people, for me, it was pretty textbook that the reason I drank and did drugs was just to escape reality, pretty much. To cover up feelings, to not feel the way I did. And, I mean, sadly enough, I think the deeper into your addiction you get, I think for a lot of people, I mean, the deeper I got, the reason I did it was fucking not to live. I mean, straight up, that's all it boiled down to, was I had no desire to live. I had no will to live. You know, when it got to towards the end of those days, every day, I mean, that was my thought process was, you know, I don't want to be here. I don't like my life. I don't love myself. And, you know, I don't have enough balls to commit suicide. And, I mean, we hear that a lot. That's something you hear a lot in meetings. And I think people can kind of get it misconstrued or take it the wrong way. But, I mean, it's fucking true, man. I mean, it's the fucking truth. And it's fucking sad. But it's just the reality of it. You know, I can remember going through therapy and treatment, and every time I would go to like a new counselor or a new group, you know, when you're filling out those forms in the beginning, and they would always ask you that question, you know, have you ever had thoughts of suicide? Have you ever thought about killing yourself? And yeah, I had those thoughts every fucking day, but I would never put that down. I would never admit to it.
So, first of all, thanks, man, for sharing that. A lot of people don't realize this about suicides. There's an emotional scale that goes from like hopeless, despair, and like just despondency. You don't see a lot of people commit suicide when they're down in that level of the bottom. It's usually on the way up once they start having more energy and they get angry, or when there's more energy involved. Like you said, I don't even have to care about myself enough to even kill myself. I remember that. I remember kind of being like that too. I remember taking shots of heroin or eating a whole bag of pills and going like, well, this might kill me. This might just get me high, whatever. You know, I don't care.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Now, escapism versus pain avoidance. You were physically addicted to alcohol, right? And if you didn't, you would get sick. So at that point, you're actually drinking. It's not only to escape reality, but it's because you're physically and chemically dependent upon that thing, right?
Right.
So it typically goes, there's three things, man. It's pain avoidance, people trying to avoid pain. The memory imprinting, which is like the triggering where you see someone that's high. Like I remember this, like in early recovery, I could smell a Vicodin, man. If I saw someone who was on opiates, I would get triggered, and it would kind of like, I would go, like get that Jones where I'd want to go get shit even when I was sober and I'd see someone else high. So it would trigger me. It was like a memory imprint. So those are two. Pain avoidance, memory imprint, and then escapism, which is the reason why I'm mentioning that is because you were saying I wanted to escape reality, but the escapism is usually further on out. So I'm just kind of correcting you a little bit. You were physically dependent upon a chemical, and you were trying to avoid pain, and it got in that stronghold where you're continuing to use. Escapism would be more so later on, get bored with life or whatever like that, and you want to escape reality. This ain't working out how you thought it would. So that's just another side of it. I'm just trying to direct you towards kind of really what was happening, because if you're in active addiction and you're physically and chemically dependent upon a substance, you're not really escaping at that point. It's pain. You're trying to avoid pain, and that's the substance that numbs the pain, man. What about letting go of guilt? Let's talk about that.
I think that's a really big part of recovery because, you know, we talk about it a lot about the mistakes that we make. and we get all this spiritual knowledge, and we want to make things right, and we want to be better people, and we want everything to be okay. And all that stuff that happens is very profound and very real. But once you get to the realization that not everybody is going to forgive you, and that you yourself have to literally let go of the guilt, meaning that you could make amends to 99 people and have all this guilt to 99 people, and there might be that one person, whether it's a friend, a brother, a sister, an ex, whoever, that literally will never forgive you, ever. And the only way that you're going to be able to move on with your life, the only way for things to be resolved is that situation is never going to be resolved until you let it go. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's, to me, I mean, I get fucking chills just even saying those words, but that to me is like 10 times above any profound thought, statement, whatever that you can have. But that's the only way. And that's going to happen. I mean, I feel like there's nobody that's going to go through recovery that's not going to come to a point where they have to realize that you just got to let that shit go, bro. You got to give it to God. You got to let go. And that's a really, really hard place to be. But when you do get to that place, it's one hell of a fucking spiritual experience for sure.
Yeah, to know that it's completely out of your hands. So let's go into this real quick. You mentioned guilt. And one thing I've seen, I'm not saying this is exactly what you're talking about, but I see this a lot, is when people are talking about shame or guilt, and it's really regret, because there's a difference here. Like, shame and guilt comes from your intentions at the time. Remember? Like, when we were in active addiction, we're not in our right mind. You weren't intending to cause damage. It's just your actions cause damage, right? So it might not be guilt or shame. It's probably you have a healthy regret for how you behaved in the past, and you would do anything to fix it, but sometimes you can't, Yeah. So I really think if you make a slight shift from the way you're talking about it too, and say, I'm regretful, I have a healthy regret of my behavior in the past, even that little shift will kind of inch you out of the way from that lower energy, man.
So you're saying that regret and guilt are different?
Yeah, because guilt has to do with intent.
So you're saying guilt is in the moment?
Your guilt would be when you are under your full right mind, strategically do something to benefit yourself at the expense of another or to harm another. Because your intention was not to hurt them, right? Or do something.
Right.
Right. Because you weren't even thinking about them. They weren't even in your mind, right? Right?
Exactly.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
What about, you said the amends, the purpose of the amends? Touch on any of that.
Something that stuck with me early on in recovery that I share a lot is that somebody asked, what is the purpose of making amends? And somebody said, say you're sorry or whatever. And I didn't know that the purpose of making amends is basically just to clean up your side of the street. It's to make things right. You only have control over certain things. I'll give you an example. When I was first in recovery, when I was 19, and I had to make some amends, and I was working at this gym, and they had this Smoothie King in the gym, right? And I was skimming off the register, right? And so I made this amends, and I was explaining it to my sponsor, and I was like, I don't know how I calculate. How much do I calculate how much I stole or whatever? And so we did a rough estimation. We prayed about it. I was real nervous, and I went in there. This is probably a year or two later, and I went and explained myself, and the manager or whatever was like, look, was asking me more questions than really I was talking, because they were interested in what was going on. And I kind of explained it to them. They said, seems like you're doing what you need to be doing. I appreciate you being honest. You know, I'm a little pissed that you stole from us, but keep the money and just keep doing what you're doing. I think there's a big misconception because I think a lot of times people can get a spiritual experience from the fact that they just get to keep a bunch of money that they saved up. You know what I mean? I mean, I really had this relief of doing it kind of, I guess you could say, like in a godly way, you know, in a spiritual way of how would God want me to handle this? And in that instance, luckily it worked out where I cleaned up my side of the street. And the main reason we do it is to make things right, is to clean up our past. You know, it's a horrible analogy, but it's just like cleaning up your credit score. Why do you do that? So you have a clean past so you can move on in the future. I mean,
yeah, repair the damage in the past. And also, like, think about this. If you were stealing money from that business, they're probably got their own business projections. They might not know that they might think their business is doing horrible when it was actually doing good. You know, they like things like that. But yeah, I've had about, I want to say, half of the people that I made financial amends to, when I went to make my financial amends, they just said, don't worry about the money. They said, just because I had already spent it on drugs years before, you know? And I just went up to tell them about, and I'd stole money from you on this, or I lied to you about how much that thing costs. I used to do this with my parents all the time. I would tell them things cost more than they didn't to skim from them.
Yeah.
You know, it feels good when you can kind of clear a debt through an amends, but I always went into it thinking that they might ask for everything that I said I took, man. And I was prepared to do whatever I could to repay it back. And that's part of it. You have to be willing. Like if they would have said, "Yeah, man, I want that 1,000." That's when you're like, it's going to take me 3-4 months, but I'll come up here every month and drop off $200 or whatever.